You talk about this, but Titanfall 2 is the Puyo Puyo Tetris of first-person shooters. Players are given the choice of playing Call of Duty or Tribes, and if they perform well in either, they get to play Hawken. To give a description that more than 4 people will understand, it's a team-based multiplayer first-person shooter with a fast and fluid movement system that allows you to fly pretty much anywhere you want. It's also got mechs. The flagship game mode, Attrition, has 2 teams of 6 race to meet a score limit by shooting each other and also AI minions that populate the maps. Dropping minions, players, and dealing damage to Titans fills your build meter. The yellow part of it deteriorates like a Devil May Cry style ranking to keep you from camping. This doesn't actually stop anyone from camping though.
What the hell is this?
Once filled, your Titan is ready for deployment, which is a big mech. It's really good at bullying everything else that's not a mech. Pilots aren't helpless against Titans though. Hunting Titans with anti-armor weapons in a group will bring them down pretty quickly. Meanwhile, fighting off pilots while you're in the Titan can get a little... Titan vs Titan combat's more focused on positioning, cooldown management, and teamwork than it is twitch aim. Twitchy aim does help though. To get good at piloting, you'll need to get a good grasp on both your own mech's kit as well as the enemies, to know when you should be pushing them and when you should be hanging back. This is on top of learning the map so you know where you can pull flanks, and developing enough situational awareness to know when you should pull flanks, i.e.
I'm going to die!
Do not run into 1v6, you will not win.
Similarly, knowing how to effectively build up and use Titan cores, which act like ults you earn mostly through damaging enemy mechs but also through killing runs of players, will put you ahead of other players and Titans. When used properly, cores will shred an enemy Titan to 0 HP, or deal massive AoE damage. When used improperly, they'll get you made fun of or demolished if you're really unlucky. It's important to remember that enemies have cores too. You can usually tell if they're about to use theirs based off how long their Titan's been out, and also usually you can tell based off how confidently they're playing. It's like trying to read a Gundam's body language. As far as Titan preference goes, I personally like Ronin the most, because he's fast.
Speed is life.
He's also got great burst damage and a weapon that excels at farming pilots. He's best used to run around nabbing as many player kills as he can get, or rear charging into enemy Titans before disengaging, since he doesn't do super great in drawn-out conflicts due to his low health. His core is a bit doofy though. His giant high-frequency blade gets a buff, and you get really fast recharging dashes, but he can't shoot during it. Usually you'll end up getting as badly beat up as the guy you're swinging on. To compensate for his mediocre ult, I like to use Nuke Eject. So when my Titan's done, I can use it to gender reveal someone else's freshly dropped one.
Bonjour.
What the fuck?
People like to act like Ronin's one of the harder Titans to play, but I don't think it's that bad. You just gotta... Second favorite is Ion. He's the least lame, long-range mech. Pilot sniping with his Q is funny. He's also got a great core, and if you catch someone not paying attention with it, you'll pretty consistently drop them to almost dead. The runner-up is Scorch, who I wanna like, but he's terrible. His entire kit is goofy nonsense. It's all reliant on your enemy being too stupid to not walk out of your glowing goopy puddles you put down. His primary weapon's really hard to hit pilots with, and instead of just exploding like you'd expect a cannon shot to, the projectile breaks into little pieces that then do damage over time if a mech is standing on top of one of the pieces. Everyone else brought straight-up guns to the fight, and Scorch is over here trying to bolt caltrops under people's feet. His only saving grace is his core, which is probably the best one in the game.
Eternal thirst torments you, and your mouth gapes wide, only to swallow fire!
It's not worth putting up with the rest of them, though. Titanfall's in-mech and on-foot gameplay come together to create a great sense of scale and asymmetric combat, where it's both fun and rewarding to bully pilots, as well as slam rockets into distracted Titans. The core fun of the whole relationship is built on top of this constant building up and knocking down of little houses of cards. Everything you do on foot gets you closer to getting in the robot, and everything done in the robot gets you closer to your thematic alpha strike that you then use to knock other people out of their robots, that they had to spend time building and now have to rebuild. Because of the work involved in getting a Titan, Just playing well and efficiently eliminating enemy mechs makes you feel like you're griefing. The feeling you're getting from denying someone their freshly dropped Titan is indiscernible from the feeling you get RDMing 9-year-olds, and there are no mods to save them here. At all times, you're building your sandcastle while kicking over enemy sandcastles, and it all just devolves into a big bully session where everyone is both mad and having fun at the same time. On top of the multiplayer, there's also a single-player campaign that's very, very good. You run around as Vincent Van Sauce and make friends with the Iron Giant. I once played it 3 times in one day. With all that said, as is fairly common knowledge, Titanfall 2 was a bit of a flop at launch. The popularly accepted explanation is that releasing a game in a new and little-known series, between the 2 biggest shooter releases of the year, one of which you own, is in fact not a winning strategy. However, post-Apex, Titanfall 2 garnered some more attention. It's been pretty quick and easy to find matches in-game for a while now, but it gets better. Briefly, at the start of May, there was a Steam sale, followed by a free weekend. Both of these happened around the same time as some tie-in stuff with Apex was happening, and it led to a huge influx of players, breaking the game's previous concurrent user record. And I think a lot of other people are getting the vibe that the desire for a Titanfall 3 is there, at least on the consumer side. Respawn may be done with it, but I'm choosing to be optimistic. So, with that in mind, I have some suggestions for a third game. Broadly, I think they should shift focus away from trying to do biannual releases with Titanfall and instead just release a single game and update it for a long period of time. Also, I think there should be a very over-the-top doubling, tripling, quadrupling, whatevering into the game's identity as an arena movement shooter, mecha thing. Number 1. Make the multiplayer part of the game free. Seems obvious to me. Titanfall's weird and new. Mecha Tribes is always going to turn a lot of people off because it's bizarre and different from other things on the market, and people didn't know if they were allowed to like it yet. It's also got big robots, which kids like. The thing is that kids don't have money. If you remove the requirement to have money to play the game, congratulations, you've got a bunch of children who will fill servers, and maybe they'll be able to steal their parents' credit card to buy battle passes or something. After that, you need to make most weapons fire just projectiles instead of hit scan. It's a movement shooter, and that's how they're supposed to be. I will not elaborate further because I don't think it's that interesting to talk about. I also think it'd be very beneficial for the game if it had different minion sets. You know, like how in Halo sometimes you're fighting the Covenant and other times you're fighting Flood. Depending on who you're fighting, you gotta switch your combat up and different weapons become more or less viable in different circumstances. Titanfall currently just has one AI scenario. Both teams have their little shooty men running around and some robots. Imagine if sometimes when you load into a map, it's populated by neutral hostile aliens like the dogs and the dragons of the campaign. Maybe you could introduce a big dumpy space ogre creature. It would act like a Titan-sized AI threat. Alternatively, you could have something like a rogue machine scenario, where there's decrepit auto-titans, reapers, and specters running around the map, trying to get the players while they're doing their attritioning on each other. I'm sure adding these AI scenarios would be a lot of work, but I think it'd pay off, and adding variants from match to match, which would keep the game fresher for longer. This is going to be a weird one, but I think they need to try to make the music a bit cooler. Currently, there are some quiet war drums that play during multiplayer matches, sometimes. Most of the time it's dead quiet, which is very bizarre to me. This isn't fitting at all for a movement shooter. Typically they've got some kind of energetic 2000s era EDM playing in the background. At a baseline, I think they need to at least get it up to Unreal Tournament levels of energy. Come on, your entire game is already based off a mutator from Unreal Tournament, but you're not going to even attempt to copy the music. If you really want to go above and beyond, you should go out and kidnap someone like the Edwardses, Mick Gordon, or I guess any of the other hypey music people to make you fun songs about mech fights. Some people may get a little weirded out if they hear lyric music playing during a multiplayer shooter, but Splatoon does it, and that game's getting a third entry. And they don't even say real words, they just kind of drown into the microphone. Finally, as I previously mentioned, Titanfall 2 feels like it was meant to be an entry in a series of semi-annual releases. While it got some content updates in the form of maps and a new Titan, even if the game performed better than it did, I don't really get the vibe that they were planning on supporting it for years. If I remember right, they were already working on a third game before the shifting gears to Apex happened. I think Titanfall as a series would be much better served if they just put out a non-numbered entry, like, I don't know, Titanfall Rising, Titanfall Engines, and then they just updated it and did seasons like they do in Apex. To go along with this longer-term approach, the game would need a more long-term progression system. Titanfall's scale is very silly. Players in a game of attrition will have created a continent of orphans and destroyed military assets whose combined costs could have ended multiple world hungers. However, the game's current Call of Duty level up and prestige loop does a very poor job at facilitating a feeling that the cool stuff you're doing each match is building towards something at all. You're just slowly ticking up a thematic time played counter. For a while now, the common replacement to these COD levels has been letting players have a free spin on the in-game slot machine every once in a while, but that's probably going to become illegal soon. So I think it's time to replace it with a more fun
engagement retention system.
This time, instead of getting consumers obsessed with your brand by getting them hooked on gambling, a more ethical and potentially more potent method should be tried. The central goal of this new system should be to lend the feeling that your isolated game sessions are actually part of one long continuous experience. Usually a ranked mode that lets players climb and fall through the course of many matches has fulfilled this purpose in other games. However, Titanfall is one of those games I just don't think lends itself to a competitive ranked format. So what I'm getting at is a system that allows for the continuity a ranked grind lends to matches, but tailored for non-competitive play, while also being more engaging than just filling a bar between games. So what exactly would that look like? Well, if you're a Sonic team member, you'd answer, add blue babies you buy off the black market. And you'd be right. In games like Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, there'd usually be fairly minimal continuity between stage playthroughs. You're typically just expected to clear a stage once so you unlock the next one, then clear that one, and then just continue the process until you hit credits. For whatever reason, the Sonic team wanted to incentivize replaying levels, so this weird virtual pet side game was added, in the form of the Chao Garden. As you play through stages, you'll collect little animals and glow sticks. Once the stage is over, you can visit the Chao Garden, where you can then feed the glow sticks and any stray animals you found to small cherub-like creatures called Chao. This levels up their stats. The ultimate goal of the Chao Garden is to make them strong enough to win an obstacle course-like races in very illegal-looking fighting tournaments. There's something extremely gratifying about seeing all your run-throughs of City Escape personified as a little creature who's superior to other little creatures because their owners played less City Escape than you. Winning the competition gives you progress towards 100%ing the game, but otherwise this whole thing is just kind of there for its own sake, which is weird because there's a lot to it. Like, a lot. Chao have a good evil alignment system, which is based off which playable characters are nice to them and which ones abuse them. Once they hit a certain age, they'll go into a cocoon and evolve into their adult form, which is dictated by their alignment and also which stats they specialized in. Over the course of their adult life, they'll grow more pronounced features, and eventually when they hit a certain age, they'll re-cocoon. But this time, instead of evolving, they choose if they should reincarnate or die, based off their life satisfaction. They've got ratings that affect how fast they can improve different stats, and you can breed them with each other to try to mix genetics and create the perfect Chao. There's also a black market to spend your rings at, where you can buy special colored Chao and a bunch of other junk. The entire system is psychotic in the best ways possible. The Chao Garden is what I'd call a macro game. It's like the opposite of a minigame, where instead of being for small contextual actions, like hacking, it's a side game that you progress through by playing the main game. Hence, a macro game. These aren't all that common. There's a couple high-profile examples, though. Most Yakuza games have an overarching side game that requires you to explore the world to collect companions. And recently, Valve has been playing with this board game that they put in their Dota Battle Passes called Cavern Crawl. To progress through the game, you have to complete challenges in your Dota matches. When you do well at Chuck E. Cheese arcade games, they give you tickets that you can redeem for prizes at a counter.
Poggers!
Wait, no, hold on. I thought of a better one. In many depictions of the afterlife, your devotion and morality in meat space dictates your rewards on the other side. Listen, if it's a good enough system to make people stop obsessing about their inevitable deaths, it's good enough to make people play the fast robot game. Macro games are the exact kind of thing I think casual shooters have been missing. They would let players be rewarded in fun ways that would normally break the main game, but won't, because it'll all happen in an isolated side game. Imagine, player in a Call of Duty gets a streak that lets them call in the tank or something, but they earn it over the course of 2 games, getting half the progress for it in the first game and half in the second, but they only deploy it in the second game. This would be totally unfair for the players in the second game, since a lot of the progress towards the tank happened without them being present. However, if Tank Boy were to perform well over the course of a few matches, and then be rewarded with a tank, but this time, it's in a hypothetical side game where you get to command units like an RTS or something, none of the players have to be unfairly punished, but Tank Guy still gets his tangible fun reward. So, how would you implement a macro game into Titanfall? It could fit in a lot easier than you'd think. The Chao Garden's already a pretty good framework for a Titanfall macro game in a lot of ways, as strange as that is to say. Just replace raising blue babies to fight with building custom mechs to fight. In the Titanfall series, we know where they fall, but not from where they fall, which seems like a plot hole to me. Thematically making the macro game around being the guy who's up in the sky dropping the robots everyone calls in would allow players to interact with an interesting aspect of the Titan ecosystem that they only barely see currently. Mechanically, I think it'd be a lot of fun too. Or at least the elaborate fanfiction I've invented inside my mind sounds fun. Players would be awarded different colored batteries for in-match milestones, so like one for every 5 pilot frags, 2 Titan destructions, or 20 grunt stomps. They could then take these batteries to their Titan workshop, or whatever you want to call it, and use them to construct Titan chassis or upgrade already constructed ones. Once you'd built your Titans up to OP levels, you could then deploy them on difficult PvE raid missions, where you'd fight hordes of AI. After the mission, your Titan chassis would be heavily damaged or completely destroyed, so you'd have to play more matches to rebuild or replace it. You could also set up like an auto-resolve system, where instead of actually doing the mission yourself, the game just does a stat check on the Titan that you're deploying, and they frame it as you being the guy in the sky dropping a Titan for another pilot. That way you've fully completed the Titan lifecycle in gameplay. Finally, the Chao Garden had no real big payoff at the end, which was a big letdown because it was a massive grind, and canonically Chao can turn into this thing. But very little was done with that. More than nothing, though. To give a proper long-term goal to the hypothetical Titanfall macro machine, completed PvE missions would build progress towards a super heavy Titan. When you've completed progress on it, you could deploy into a random game in progress as a massive overpowered boss character, and turn some random scrubs attrition game into a spontaneous Titan-only versus Saxon Hail mode, where both teams stop fighting each other and instead team up to fight against the super heavy Titan. Once the fight resolves, the super heavy would nuke eject and destroy the whole map. And then players on both sides would be given rewards based off damage dealt to the super heavy Titan or Titans destroyed as the super heavy Titan. I know this part would go against the previous idea of not rewarding power to players that they can then use against other players, but it'd be fun to do it a little bit. Ideally, it wouldn't happen all that frequently. Providing rewards for fighting against it while framing the battle as a special event match should minimize how obnoxious it is, while still giving players turns at being super powerful against other players. Anyway, I don't think it's really a question of if this sort of system would work for Titanfall. People are still feeling the fallout of the Chao Garden's success to this very day. Sega refuses to put Chao Gardens in any of their new Sonic games because they're cowards and fear its power. The question isn't will this work? The real question is if saving Titanfall is worth unleashing this back into the world. Once we start going down this path of engagement maximization through the use of macro games, it's only a short trip into verification can futurism.